All right, we are back for another episode of Long and Foul. I'm your host, Joe Doyle, and I'm here with Alex Juicy Jensen. We've got a nice little idea here for Mariners fans once again, and this one is going to kind of wrap itself around the rebuild in and of itself, where the team has come from, where they're going, where they're currently at, and forecasting what the lineup might look like in 2023, which I think, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, 2023 is probably that mark, probably that date, that season to circle in where the team could really compete for a potential World Series run, no?
That's what they've said. So for better or worse, I think that's the year that Dipoto is going to have to kind of prove it. I think that he's going to be given a free run until then. But that's the real year where he starts to get on that hot seat and he kind of has to either put up or shut up.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think 2020 has obviously been a growing year. 2021 is going to be year one with, damn near all the prospects. 2022, kind of that last growing opportunity, and then the contention run. So I think what you and I are doing here is we're building off of a fun article that Corey Brock of The Athletic published today, listing out what the Mariners team might look like in 2022. Really cool roster design, some cool new acquisitions on the free agent market. Obviously, a lot of the prospects are involved in that team, but let's just kick it off, man. We've got a little display here to kind of show what this team will look like. 2023. We're forecasting for $180 million cap, or I should say payroll for the Mariners. They've capped out at 162 in 2018. So if you mark for inflation and a team high in spend, we both figured 175 to 180 would be a fair assumption for a World Series run. So I'll just kick it off to you, Alex. Let's start with catcher, man. What do you think Seattle's looking at in terms of a future backstop, and where do you think they'll go?
I think they're sticking in-house for this one. I think we have good depth here. We have a couple options. I believe Tom Murphy could still be under contract then. Our newly brought in Torrance is another option, but I'm going Cal Raleigh. Just anything I've heard from within the organization has just been they love this kid. They think that, he's just one of the smartest people they've dealt with. Excellent film study. When you look at the numbers that he's had with pitchers, everyone has a lower ERA with him than with other catchers. He's definitely calling a smart game. He's fully understanding of just about everything this organization wants to do. And with the way my lineup built out, fairly importantly, he hits from both sides. So you're not going to get too lopsided on one side.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make great points. I think Cal Raleigh is the most fiscally responsible move. He is a good defender. The arm is a little bit in question. It was pretty good in Modesto last year. Took a step back or struggled to adapt, if you will, to Arkansas. But everything that we've heard is it's a big league arm, good enough to play at the big league level. So presuming he makes his debut in 2022, 2023, he will absolutely still be at the league minimum, which in this case is going to be not $6 million.
I was a little bit surprised seeing that coming out.
600. It'll be right now. It's like 583. So we can just assume round up. We'll say 600,000. So a couple other options that I think are just worth mentioning because it kind of gives the fan base an idea of different routes they could go. Obviously, you have JT Realmuto, who's going to be a free agent after the 2020 season. That's definitely going to be the big fish. He's probably going to be a $26 to $30 million a year man. I mean, he's probably going to be like a 4-year, $120 million player. So it takes a big chunk out of 2023 right away, but he would be off the books by 2025. A couple other options. Salvador Perez will become available after 2021. And then after 2022, not really much to speak of. But then again, a lot of those players just haven't broken out yet. So I think that's a good call. I like Cal Raleigh at catcher. First base, pretty self-explanatory, I would think, no?
I got to go with one of the hardest exit velocities in baseball right now. my boy Evan White.
Yeah.
And you know what? For how he started, I really don't care. He started slowly at pretty much every level he's been at. I'm encouraged. And I think there's going to be 30 home run a year power there. And with how I think this lineup's going to fill out, I'm very happy with this, especially with the defense he brings.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the hit tool is a lot better than what we've seen. Even if he ends up being a 235, 240 hitter, you've got the best, in my opinion, you've got the best defensive first baseman in the league. At least by 2023, he will have passed Matt Olson for that crown. I would be surprised if that changes. And then, yeah, I mean, I think there's a definitive 25 home run potential guy here. 2023 is going to be his fourth year, so that will be his ARB 1 year. And actually, now that I think about it, he's been signed already. So,
yep, he should be in for.
I want to say it's about $3 million.
It is $3 million. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's $3 million. So $3 million. That deal is just so good for the team.
Yeah, fantastic.
He's batting 190 right now, and I still think that deal is just a killer deal for the Mariners. So a big win there. Here's the first one that's really gonna be up for contention. Second base. You got Ty France, you got Shed Long, you got Dylan Moore, you got a ton of free agent opportunities out there. What are you doing?
So this is going to be my first out of the organization move right here. I think that when you have a team that if they're really looking to compete for a World Series in 2023, you're going to need some veteran presences there, some people that have been there before. There are a lot of options at second base in the organization, but there's no one person that really, truly keeps me from going out of the organization here. And I'm going to bring in a 34, almost 35-year-old DJ LeMahieu on what will be the second year of what I'm projecting to be about a 3-year, $40 million deal.
Okay, so he's a free agent after this season. So you'd like to bring him in after this year, pull him away from the Yankees, and so it'd be so he would have 21, 22. So it'd be the third year of his deal.
Or third year, pardon me. Yeah.
And you're thinking like a 3 or a 4 year deal?
I'm thinking 3 years, $40 million.
3 years, $40 million. I could get behind that. I think personally, just thinking outside the box, I think LeMahieu is going to be a little bit more expensive than that. More than $14 million a year. I would guess, I'll say 3 years, $57 million, which would be $17 million a year. What do you think about that?
I mean, I would still do that. I don't know if him as a 6'4" second baseman that is going to be hitting that 34, 35 mark. I don't know if he'll get quite that much money. I mean, even I think when he signed this deal, he was coming off a Gold Glove year where he, again, was a solid player coming off of multiple years of batting title contention, and he still just got 2 years, 24. So We'll see. But honestly, either way, he's the kind of presence that I think we'll really need within the organization at that point, and I'd be really happy to have him in.
Well, and let's split the difference. We'll say 3 years, $45 million, so $15 million a year. But I think he's an excellent addition to the team. He's going to hit, and that's one thing that the team has struggled to get from the position. It remains to be seen what his defense would look like at second base. That far into his career, but I definitely think you've got a winner here. LeMahieu is that's a tough one.
I think it's MAH and then IEU, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that looks right. So DJ LeMahieu on a $15 million AAV. So we're taking a little bit of a cut there into the cap space. Not too worried about LeMahieu as he would come off of the books after 2023. So probably a good investment, especially to kind of groom these guys into winners coming from New York. I mean, they have that New York winning attitude. Third base is another one, though. Definitely a tricky one. 2023 could be the first year that Kyle Seager is officially off the books for Seattle. Do you have any ideas on where the team would go or where you'd like the team to go? So
there are some really tempting players that are going to be out there. mainly Nolan Arenado and Chris Bryant. And it's going to be really tempting to sign one of those guys. I've always been a huge Bryant fan personally, so I'd love to have him in the organization. That being said, I think our top prospect in 2023 is going to be Noelvi Marte, who might be one of the top prospects in baseball. I don't see him sticking at shortstop long term. I haven't heard things from within the organization that makes them basically think that they are going to be doing that. I think he's viewed as a third baseman, and I think that he's going to be a tough guy to block at third base when you know that he's going to be ready to be up probably at some point in 2023 or 2024. So I've got to stand in-house. Ty France, it's not the flashiest thing ever, but it's an affordable move. We know he at least can hit a little bit. He can play around. His contract's going to be expiring, I think, after 2023, and sets it up nicely to transition into Noelvi Marte.
So you think Ty France will still be the guy in 2023 with Noelvi Marte kind of bumping for playing time there?
Exactly.
Okay, I can get behind that. I think two things are going to happen with Noelvi Marte. He's far enough away in that you could see him being flipped for a big-time starting pitcher. I think he could be the anchor around a big-time starting pitcher trade, or the team just believes in him so heavily that he will be the third baseman of the future, and it's going to come down to whether you can hit. I like that. I think for the purpose of this, because Noelvi Marte is like the future, and he's going to get quite a few at-bats in 2023 if the bat is real, we'll stick him in there. And Ty France definitely comes into play, in a number of different spots down here. So I like that. Let's go to shortstop, man. What are you thinking?
So this is where I see this organization really spending a lot of money right here. There is a tremendous amount of high-end talent that's going to be available in the next couple years at the position, mainly that loaded 2022 class. We'll see, who winds up actually, making it to there. Some guys are going to sign extensions, or they're going to get traded and sign extensions with a new team. We'll see something like that. So we don't know who it's going to be between, say, Correa or Francisco Lindor or Trevor Story. I think Lindor is going to get an absurd amount of money. I think he's just one of those guys who's going to get a huge, huge deal. I think that he's going to be the top target, if I was to guess, in this organization. But I think Trevor Story is going to be the guy that winds up being a more reasonable ask to sign. He's going to be, I believe, 29 years old in the 2023 season. And he's had, honestly, by a lot of metrics, as good of defense as Lindor, even playing in cores. I think that he's done everything you could ask for him. And I think he'll get that kind of coming out of cores discount that you see with players. So I have us going with Trevor Story at around a 6-year, $210 million contract.
Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. That is a big number. That's, what is that, 35 a year?
35 a year, yeah.
Wow. So Trevor Story, a Seattle Mariner for 6 years at $35 million a year through his age 35 season, huh? I think you're right. I think you kind of look at some of the options here. You got Carlos Correa, who it's hard to imagine Carlos Correa as a Seattle Mariner. I think Francisco Lindor isn't going to make it to free agency. He probably gets flipped from Cleveland and signs an extension with, let's be honest, the Dodgers, right?
It's always the Dodgers.
It's always the Dodgers. I think with Corey Seager, that would be really fun, but it just logistically, does it make sense for one Seager to be in Seattle and then another Seager follow him in right on his heels as one leaves? I don't know. That's kind of a wonky. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And then Javi Baez, I'm sure, is going to be signed by the Cubs to an extension. So, yeah, the Rockies, they've been a little tight with their purse strings in the past, and I definitely think Trevor Story makes the most sense out of the group. So, yeah, let's say Trevor Story at shortstop. And you think about $35 million a year?
I think so. I had Lindor at something like $8,320. So I think there's going to be a lot of money going around that offseason. But the big thing for me too with him over a guy like Correa or Seager is it's really hard for me to see Seager or Correa being able to stay at shortstop for that entire contract. Just with their size and athletic profiles, injury histories, etc. And I do really think that Noelvi Marte is going to be a top 10 prospect at that point in time. So I think building organizationally, it makes more sense to pay for the guy that's going to stick at the position with the premier glove.
Well, I mean, the question begs, what happens with JP Crawford?
So in my situation where I had Noelvi starting the year down and France as the starting third baseman, I had him as kind of the utility guy because I know he can play third base. I know he can play second base. I know he can play shortstop. I know he can play in the outfield if needed. And I kind of viewed him as he's going to be the guy that gets probably 100 starts in the year all over the place.
Okay. So you definitely would see him as one of the utility guys.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. And I think JP comes off the books after the 2024 season. So even if he's not viewed in this class right here, he's also a non-tender candidate. If the Mariners sign someone like Trevor Story, JP Crawford, if he's hitting 240 with above average defense, he's going to be a prime trade candidate as well for some teams that are rebuilding. So a lot can be done with JP if he's not the answer at that point. Now, if he's still on the roster, the team's going to have to pay him. This will be ARB 2 for him. So, I mean, realistically, you're probably looking at $5 million for utility guy. Is that something we're comfortable with?
I think so. I mean, if we get down to where, we get to the end there and cap space is really tight, maybe he's a guy we edge out for somebody else. But I think that especially with where this organization is, and guys are going to go down at some point this year. You don't know who, but it's going to happen. It always does. I think he's a valuable guy to have around.
Okay. Well, I do not think this cap space equation that I wrote took into account the $5 million that I put in there. So we'll just kind of keep track of that in our heads that there's only about $120 million here. Left field, what are you thinking here? The Mariners are chock full of potential candidates for the outfield.
Yeah, this is going to be fun to see how it plays out. But in left field, starting off 2023, I think the newly acquired Taylor Trammell is going to be the guy. He's going to be a plus or better defender in left field. The arm's not going to matter as much. And I think that he can hit towards the top of a lineup and at minimum get on base. And if he somehow clicks in Seattle and hits his ceiling, I mean, all of a sudden you might have a borderline all-star level player. So I think he's the guy. And fairly importantly for how this is building out, he's a left-handed bat, which I think is really important as well.
Okay. I like that. I'm not a huge believer in Trammell. I don't think he's like a slam dunk by any means. So I had someone that I wanted to kind of throw your way that I think might be a more fun option. Tell me what you think. After the 2021 season, signing Michael Conforto to be the left fielder. He's a local product, Oregon State Beaver.
Redmond High School.
Redmond High School. You might want to come back to the Pacific Northwest. He'll only be 29, and he's really picked it up with the bat. What do you think about maybe using Trammell, maybe using Haniger, JP Crawford, kind of using those guys as trade bait among other prospects that will be in the organization at that time to go out, get a local product and maybe an established bat that you can put another lefty that you can put into the lineup?
I think it's going to come down to where you want to spend that cap space. And with the Mariners set up like they are, do you want to spend that money in the outfield where you have so many different options? I mean, I would be excited to have Conforto here, but I think when you're building out a roster, I think that they would be added. I can see it, but I think I prefer Trammell personally.
I think you're right. And I think DePoto would probably agree in that signing Conforto after the 2021 season would be effectively giving up on one of Trammell, Lewis, Kelnick, or Rodriguez, because there's just not enough space for five guys like that, especially someone that will demand at-bats because of his salary like Conforto. So, for the purpose of this, we'll go with Taylor Trammell. I don't think that's a bad call whatsoever. And he's going to come in very, very cheap. He will be another $600,000 guy. So we still got a lot of cap space here. I think center field and right field, also a couple of positions that should be pretty easy. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Okay. So center field,
names.
Let me just ask you, just for the sake of the exercise, have you seen enough from Kyle Lewis to supplant the presumed Jared Kelnick in center field? Or by 2023, are we assuming a 25-year-old Jared Kelenic or 24-year-old Jared Kelenic is going to be the center fielder over a 28-year-old Kyle Lewis?
Yeah, I think Kelenic will still be 24 starting the season.
24.
I don't know. I think right now we've seen enough of Kyle Lewis to stick him there and then figure the rest out. I think that we're going to see a lot of different people in center field. I think we'll see some games with Trammell because he's such a good athlete. I think we'll see games with Kyle Lewis. I think that we'll see games with Jared Kelenic. But I think this is going to be the default, and maybe that will make a bit more sense when you see who my DH is.
Okay. So Jared Kelenic in 2023, assuming he comes up in 2021, will still be on the league minimum. That's also assuming he does not get signed to a enormous extension, which I think
it could happen.
I think it's very possible that happens. Kyle Lewis will be in ARB1, so
Correct.
He'll probably be making, we'll say, about 1.5. He could make more than that. I mean, guys like Chris Bryant, guys like Cody Bellinger, they pulled like $9 million in their first ARB year. But Kyle Lewis is going to have to be the Kyle Lewis that we've seen over the last, 3 months, over the next 3.5 years to warrant a super number. So I think 1.5 is fair. I mean, you look at Mitch Haniger, for example. Mitch Haniger had a monstrous 2017 or 2018, and he just hit, I think it was 2018 that he did. He just hit ARB1 in 2020. He's only making $1.1 million, and that's after being an all-star in one of his seasons. So it takes a lot to really put up those big numbers. But I'm going to throw it back to you. A couple different options here at DH. I know there's a wonder kid in the minor leagues and the aforementioned Haniger. What do you see here?
I think Haniger is just one of those guys who it makes too much sense for us to trade him not to. And it hurts because I love Haniger. He's still actually my favorite Mariner despite it all. I love the guy. I want to see him come back. I want to see him come back strong. But when you look at the just amazing amount of depth of players that are going to be demanding playing time in 2023, in 2022, in 2021 even, I think it makes too much sense for the Mariners to trade him for something. So I think he's going to be out. If he's there, I do think he's the DH. But I think that we're going to see Julio. I think he's going to be the guy, and I think we're just going to be resting a lot of those outfielders every fourth game or something like that. Put Julio in right, switch around who's in center, who's in left, and give someone a day where they don't have to play defense, rest their legs a bit.
Okay, I think that makes sense. In looking at this lineup, though, I will say it lacks left-handed punch for now. You got Kelenic, you got Trammell, and then you've got Cal Raleigh, who's a switch hitter. Kyle Seager has obviously departed by now. I think there's no way to beat around the fact that Julio Rodriguez is going to be in this lineup. He's going to be rotating in at right field, or he's going to be rotating in left field, or he's going to be rotating in a designated hitter. He will be a major piece of this lineup. But that being said, I do think that this would be an opportunity for the team to go out, acquire a left-handed bat that can rotate in at that DH spot, at least as a platoon option. Do you have any ideas of any lefties that could be hitting the market? The first one that jumps to mind for me is someone like a Jock Peterson, but he's been slumping so much that I actually think that he will fizzle out. Just the way that his body has progressed over the last few years, I think he'll fizzle out by then. My guess is after the 2022 season, 2021-2022, so after this upcoming season next year, Kyle Schwarber will be hitting the free agent market. I don't think he's the type of bat that carries, or the type of fielder that carries much value whatsoever in the outfield. He's going to be a little bit older. He can play the outfield still. I think Kyle Schwarber is the type of guy you bring in, you platoon with all of these outfielders, and you just kind of figure it out. And I think you could probably get Schwarber on like a 3-year, $50 million deal. Do you have any objections to someone like a Kyle Schwarber rotating in?
I could see it. I think that if we're paying Kyle Schwarber $16 million a year, I think that they would just spend the extra money and, pay that 40 to 45 that it's going to take to bring in someone like a Lindor and get that switch hitting bat in there instead.
True.
just because they've got so much talent at that DH or in the outfield particularly, but that they can slot into that DH and kind of get a little bit younger and have a little bit more fun with it.
Yeah, and I think the point remains, like, if you're going to pay Kyle Schwarber 16, why not pay a younger, more versatile Conforto 21 or 22? It's really the same.
Well.
It's really the same argument. So, so with DH, we're just going to put in Julio Rodriguez, but that is also taking into consideration these four guys right here are going to do an awful lot of switching around. So that brings us to 122 million. Excuse me, 117 million. Yeah, 117 million. So I wish I would have gotten this equation right, but hey, it happens.
It's all good.
So let's talk about catcher 2. Tom Murphy. He's controllable through 2025. He's going to be in ARB 2, probably cost you about $3.5-4 million at that point. Luis Torrens, he's going to be at league minimum. What do you think the team does?
I'm sticking with Torrens. I think that there's a decent chance we could see some big catcher prospects coming in the next couple of years for the Mariners, depending on how their draft strategy goes. I think that it would make a lot of sense for them to build up the middle in the next couple of drafts. But I think with Torrens, he's cheap, he's a fantastic defender, and there's a little bit of offensive upside there. And he's just going to be, I think, 27 years old. So I think that makes more sense than sticking with an older bat-first catcher with the way this lineup's going.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure why this one didn't pick up, but yeah, I agree with you, and I think Luis Torrens is a good defensive backstop. He's a righty. Cal Raleigh is a primary lefty, even though he can hit switch. I think that makes sense. Utility guy. Are we both in agreement that Dylan Moore has just shown too much to not be part of this team's future?
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's one. There's going to be more than 3 guys there. I think the guy that I would argue with, just for the sake of arguing here, is definitely going to be. Well, we'd kind of have to slot in Ty France probably, who I just actually picked up, and he's actually ARB1, so he'll be pretty affordable. But a guy that's made some really loud connections in the alternative camp and that was put on the 60-man that the organization seems to love is Austin Shenton, who I could really see, spelling that first base, third base. And he's got a tremendous amount of power. He can play second base if he has to. And he really has seemed like he's an arrow up sort of guy. So I think he's the option that you're arguing about there. Yeah,
I think that makes sense. The one thing I will say is Torrens and Crawford, we don't have an outfielder in that group yet. I think Austin Shenton does make a lot of sense. And there's going to be more than 3 utility guys. There's generally 4. I've only got 3 spots here. Yeah, I think a Ty France is definitely going to take one of these spots. Either a Ty France or a Austin Shenton is going to take one of these. And we'll say 1 million again. Did I do 10 million there? I did. So yeah, again, I missed that spot there. So 6 million on the books. So yeah, Ty France, Austin Shenton, I think both make sense in one of these spots. And then here you've got a Dylan Moore, a Tim Lopes, a Braden Bishop. I mean, anybody that can be a versatile defensive outfield option for the team. So we can just keep in mind, we're about 7 million off here from the cap space. So looking at about 114.5 million left. I'm assuming, based on how this has gone, even though the team has spent $50 million a year on Trevor Story and DJ LeMahieu, there's going to be some money spent in this rotation. Who's the ace? Who's going to be the ace in 2023?
I think it's going to be a guy who occasionally lives in Maple Valley down there in 2021. I think Trevor Bauer makes a lot of sense here. I think we could look at someone like a James Paxton reuniting. The Mariners have seemed to be very open to reuniting with some of their older guys. He had his best year here. He's, from kind of the area in, I believe, British Columbia. Mm-hmm. But I think Bauer's the guy. I think there's a lot of familiarity with him and some of the guys in the organization. I think he's likes the Seattle area. And I think most importantly, with how much pitching depth we have, which I almost kind of didn't realize how absurd the amount of starting options we're going to have is. Yeah. But I think most importantly, he's the guy who said, I don't want to sign a long-term contract extension. And I don't think that means he's signing a 1-year deal and just being a true mercenary. But I think we could look at something like a 3-year deal where the Mariners are going to be comfortable paying him a lot of money per year. So I kind of view Trevor Bauer as a guy who signs for maybe 3 or 4 years at, $35 million a year.
Okay. So is that presuming that he signs with the Mariners immediately after the 2020 season, or are you thinking maybe he does mercenary his contract out for 1 year in San Diego this offseason and then comes to Seattle after that? Kind of how would you play that out? When does he arrive?
I think it's tricky to just assume that he's going to mercenary. So I think we got to go with assuming, let's say, a 4-year at 140.
4 years, 140 million.
And he signs after 2020. Yeah. So He's in his 3rd year with rotation.
I'm gonna combat that. I think I just hitting off the top of my head. I think Trevor Bauer is chasing a ring. I think he's chasing a ring. I think he is going to do at least 1 year or maybe 2 years searching for that ring in either San Diego or, I don't think there's any chance in hell he'd end up in New York. I don't think New York would have him. But I think he ends up going to like a Chicago or a San Diego for a year or two, kind of gives it that go. And then when Seattle is on the precipice of potentially going after that ring, that's when I think they bring him in. But I definitely agree with you. It's almost a foregone conclusion that this guy is going to end up a Mariner at some point in the near future. So we can, converse back and forth over when he's going to be here. But I think the point stands. He will be, or at least we think he's going to be in Seattle for 2023, more than just Trevor, for 2023. And yeah, I think like 30 to 35 million is probably right. So let's do 32.
That works for me.
Yeah, I think 32 is fair, especially if you're doing 1-year deals. I don't know. It could end up a lot heavier than that. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. All right, so that is a pretty big chunk of change, but as you can see, really, just throwing boatloads of cash at people. Still got $82.5 million to play with, and I tell you what, Alex, there's a lot of starting pitchers that we're going to talk about here in a minute that aren't going to cost anything. So who's starting pitcher number 2?
I think he was the draft pick this year, Emerson Hancock. I think when you look at who the high ceiling guys we have are, I think this probably his 2nd year in the pros. I think he probably comes up 2022. He might be ready to come up next year, but I think he's going to need a full year in the minors. I think he comes up towards the end of 2022 or maybe midway point. So he's going to be really cheap, but his stuff is just too good. And I honestly think that what Max Wiener and the rest of the guys that are developing pitchers in this system are going to do with him is just going to make him a legitimate number 2. I think if you want to chase the playoffs, you don't want him as your ace. It's hard to rely on someone like that this early on, but the ceiling is just immense. He's one of the few people that has a true ace ceiling in the minors, and I think he's going to be the top guy and probably the future guy once Bauer's out of town.
Yeah, and even if Emerson Hancock isn't your number 2 by this point, even if he's still kind of your number 3 behind Logan Gilbert, who will be more seasoned, who we'll get to, or even George Kirby, I think we're in agreement that the upside on Emerson Hancock is greater than that of Gilbert or Kirby. So yeah, we could go back and forth on whether or not this kid's going to be number 2, 3, or 4 at this point, but I totally agree. I think at some point in the 2023 season, Emerson Hancock is going to establish himself as, one of the top 2 arms in the organization. So let's move over to starting pitcher number 3. We got 2 righties now. So where does the team go with starting pitcher number 3?
I think it's going to be a lefty. Maybe not the one you think. Justice Sheffield's shown me a lot this year. And I think he's going to be one of those guys who continues to get better. I don't think he's going to be a true top of the rotation guy, but I think he's going to be a legitimate middle of the rotation guy. He's not going to cost a ridiculous amount. He's going to be in the prime of his career. I think he'll be 27 years old. And I think importantly, he's a lefty.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, right now, Sheffield for me is on the precipice. I went into this season kind of with a foregone conclusion that Justice Sheffield is not going to be a member of the future rotation. Thought he was going to be a good long lefty, but he's shown that, maybe with that changeup that's fringy right now and the two seam and some of the tunneling action that he gets on the outside of the plate with righties, he could end up working his way as a lefty in this rotation. So not against it. I don't know if he's the number 3, but the way that the rotation lines out, you can't go righty, righty, righty. So, this is probably going to have to be a lefty in terms of just the turn in the rotation. So we'll go with Justice Sheffield. The other options are obviously you got Marco Gonzalez, you got Yusei Kikuchi. I don't know if Kikuchi is going to be a Mariner by this point. The team have a team option after 2021, and it's like 15 or 16 million a year. So that'll be a tough call for the team.
16, so I think,
16, yeah. So Justice is going to have to continue, Kikuchi is going to have to continue to show that he's really turned a corner and he's going to be, an integral part of this rotation for 4 years after 2021 for them to pick up that option. So, I think Sheffield makes sense. And again, you're talking about a guy that is probably just going to be making about 1.5 million in ARB 1. I don't think he'll be ARB 2 yet, but it'll be close. So on to the next righty. I'm assuming Logan Gilbert?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, I think he's a guy who's just a really solid, steady, middle of the rotation guy that is going to give you almost 200 innings a year of quality baseball, an ERA just shy of 4, and he's just really going to make things easy on the bullpen by eating a ton of innings. And I think when he's your 4, that's a good rotation.
I can't argue with that at all. I think Gilbert has a number 2 ceiling. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to think he reaches that ceiling. But when you've got a guy like Trevor Bauer and you've got like a guy like Emerson Hancock on his heels, you got to slot a lefty in there. Things get a little interesting. So Logan Gilbert, $600,000. Again, my equation not working. So let's go on to the 5th starter here. Who is the last guy in your presumed rotation?
It's really tempting to go with a guy like George Kirby or even a Brandon Williamson, but I'm sticking with a guy that's going to still be under contract there, that's just been really steady for us. Clearly, the organization loves him, and I'm going Marco Estrada.
Marco Gonzalez, but yeah.
Oh, pardon, Marco Gonzalez. What am I talking about?
I think you're right. I think Marco means so much more to the team.
Definitely not Marco Estrada.
Not Marco Estrada. I think the rebuild will have failed if Marco Estrada's their guy. I think Gonzalez means a whole lot more to this organization than his pitching does. So I think he's just the perfect number 5. I think he's a type of guy that can pitch for 4 more years with the organization. He can go out and just run himself into a 3.9, 4.0 ERA year after year after year because he doesn't walk anybody. I think Marco's the perfect fit there. Do you have any idea on what Marco's contract looks like in 2023?
I have a tremendous idea because it's exactly $6.75 million.
That is just robbery. Wow. Okay, $6.5 million. So let's just add this up here. We got a sum of $41.2 million. I'm just going to keep track here just so we don't lose our sanity. We have $57.5 million here.
$6.75, but if $250,000 is making a big difference, we're doing something wrong.
And $7 million on the bench. $8 million on the bench because there's one more guy we're not taking into account. So that is a sum of $106.7 million. So that leaves you, $70 million to dance in the bullpen. There's a lot of things you can do with $70 million in a bullpen. Why don't you throw out a couple guys that you think are going to be a part of this bullpen 4 years from now?
So, I thought about signing guys like Brad Hand was a guy that there's going to be at least some familiarity with that could be a guy. But I thought about it, and it's so unreliable. I think that we end up trading for quality relievers that we know are having a great year that year when it comes to it. So I think we're mostly staying in-house. I think there's a couple guys that really stand out to me. One of them's a guy we've talked about before, Juan Ten. I think he's just going to be a guy who really moves, maybe not quite as high of a ceiling. I mean, it'd be crazy to say he's Edwin Diaz, but in a similar manner. They switch him over. He's got high octane stuff, similar build, almost kind of a similar 2-pitch mix. I think he's going to be a fun guy that's going to be a part of this.
I think you're spot on. I think 110 is definitely going to be a part of this bullpen. If he's not a part of the rotation, if he's part of the rotation, I'd be a little concerned that the team hasn't spent enough money as they need to. But yeah, I think 110 is an excellent choice. I'm going to throw one on here just because he's brand new to the team. Andres Munoz, I think, is probably going to be a part of this organization by then. And if he isn't, then the arm didn't come back and it just never worked out. But not projecting him in the bullpen at this point, I think would be troubling. I guess would be the word. You'd want to see him in the bullpen 4 years from now. What do you got?
We got to go with Justin Dunn. I think that we've seen enough to know that maybe, he could start if he has to. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not the best thing. And we've all seen enough to know he's got dirty stuff that's going to play up in the bullpen. So I think if we're kind of, taking like Vegas odds for who the closer is in 2023, I think Justin Dunn might be the front runner right now.
Yeah, I've thought Justin Dunn was going to be the closer since this offseason. The only thing I'm a little concerned with on Justin Dunn is I do wonder whether or not he's the type of arm that you give the ball to and say, give me 25 of your best pitches. I wonder if he's the type of arm that can pump it up to 96 or 97 and really break off an even better slider, because the slider has been a little underwhelming for me. But I think he's got more in the tank. So I'd like to see what he can do given the opportunity. I'm going to throw a guy on here that you might not expect, and that is Garrett Richards. I think he
not a guy expected.
No,
I like the spin rates. You always like the spin rates.
Velo. He's essentially, I think he could be what Blake Trinan was in 2018, because the stuff is just so unhittable, and you give him the ball for 30 pitches, and I think this is an 8th inning arm. He's going to be expensive, I think, if he proves himself. So we'll say $7 million, kind of a Juan Nicasio type deal, like a 2-year, $15 to $20 million deal after 2022.
He's a Dipoto guy too, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
he is actually. I mean, he was close. He was definitely in LA when Dipoto was there, so they're familiar with each other. I think he'd be a great way to spend. Listen, there's so much money here on the table, and it kind of just shows that's $10 million. So that only puts us at about $117 million in payroll. I think what you got to do is the team is going to have to spend. They're going to have so much money to work with here. I think you got to spend big on a guy, and I'm going to throw a name out. It might not, people might not love the idea, and that's totally fine because he's made some remarks in the past that are a little disparaging. But I'm going to say Josh Hader. He'll be available after the 2023 season, so maybe the team finds a way to acquire him between now and then. And he's going to be a $19 million, $20 million a year guy. But I think this is going to be the time when the Mariners need to go out and spend exorbitantly or acquire exorbitantly a knockdown reliever, a guy that you can throw out there and the game is over. So I think Josh Hader is the type of guy, especially a lefty, that fits that mold. I also think Zach Britton, if Zach Britton is still the Zach Britton that we've seen in New York, would be a great fit. But yeah, those are just a couple guys that I think make a lot of sense. Are there any other relievers that Brad Hand I thought was a really excellent idea in there? Anybody else that kind of makes sense for you as far as relievers go?
So I think that Hader makes a ton of sense too, especially if things work out like this, because he's a lefty, honestly. And so I like that. I think that he's a guy that we could go out and acquire too and sign to an extension. I think that he seems to have put those comments behind him, and it's been quiet on that front, at least recently. And it's been a time where those comments could have been coming back up again, and they haven't. So that's important. I think there's a couple guys in-house that I kind of want to throw out there.
Yeah.
Sam Delaplane is one of my favorite arms in the whole system. I just love watching him pitch. I think he'll be a part of the rotation in some manner. I think we'll need a long reliever and we'll need some lefty. I think LJ Newsome will be a guy who's kind of still around. Probably not a guy that is going to be seen a ton, but he'll be there. Anthony, I don't know how to say his name. Misowitz. Is another guy that I'd throw out there. And just because, like I mentioned earlier, we're lacking lefties here, I think Brandon Williamson is a guy whose stuff plays up really, really well in the pen. And I think that he could be one of those lefty arms as well.
I think Brandon Williamson is a really good call. He kind of oftentimes gets forgotten with this big three. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Brandon Maurer from when Danny Holtzen and Taijuan Walker and James Paxton were coming up. Brandon Maurer was like that, the big four ? And he ended up going on to have a really good relief career as a reliever. So maybe Brandon Williamson kind of fits that mold. He's going to be another $600,000 guy. So this brings the relief options to about $32.8 million, which still only brings the team's payroll to $139.5 million. I'm going to throw one in here just because we've got the money to spend, and I think it's a really fun idea that fits this team. And I'm just going to throw it on screen here. We're going to get rid of Justice, and we're going to put in one Blake Snell. And he's going to be a guy that pulls in $27 million a year, and all of a sudden, and he's a lefty, which, obviously fits exactly what you're looking for here. And we'll just do this, and that brings you to $165 million. So what you're looking at: Trevor Bauer, Emerson Hancock, Blake Snell, Logan Gilbert. Blake Snell, also a Shoreline kid, if I'm not mistaken. So grew up a Mariners fan. I think it makes a lot of sense after the 2022 season. Logan Gilbert and Marco Gonzalez. That is one hell of a rotation. The lineup. We can kind of sit here and think about what the lineup is going to look like, but you're probably looking at someone like Taylor Trammell or Jared Kelenic leading things off. And then, you got LeMahieu, you got Kyle Lewis, you got Trevor Story. Evan White's bat will be very formidable at that point. Julio Rodriguez will have a year of big league pitching under his belt. I think there's certainly room here for another bat. Maybe you go out and you replace a Taylor Trammell with a Conforto or a Schwarber or, any number of different people. But I think this exercise kind of shows what this team could look like, even if ownership is willing to match what they spent in 2018. So, and this is just matching 2018. If we wanted to go up to 180, we'd still have $15 million to spend here. So what are your thoughts on the team? What are your thoughts on the construction? Is this a World Series roster?
I think it could be. And I think most importantly, leaving a decent chunk of cap there gives us some room to, be dealing with these players getting further into arbitration, maybe signing some extensions, making some moves at the deadline to get the pieces that we're going to need, which I think is huge. And I think most importantly too, with still guys like Noelvi Marte, George Kirby, I think Jose Corniel is going to be a big arm in the future. Isaiah Campbell, Sam Carlson gets forgot about. Zach Deloach is going to be something, and we're going to be able to trade, outfield depth. Yeah. We'll have exciting J2 guys coming in, including George Feliz, who was here last year. You've got Martin Gonzalez coming in next year. There's some pretty exciting names there. Connor Phillips might develop into something special. Who knows? Yep. We paid him a good amount of money.
He at 97. At worst he's a big bullpen arm.
So yeah, we've got enough to kind of keep the waves coming and also trade for whatever we need. So I'm pretty excited.
Me too, man. This didn't even dive into the different trade opportunities with people like George Kirby, with some of the prospects that we were talking about. I think Jerry Dipoto has done a really admirable job building this thing from the ground up, and there's an awful lot of roster flexibility with some of the pieces that he's got right now. So, I think the team is in a really good spot. I think there's a million different ways to attack this, but the point stands that the amount of resources and talent that this organization currently has, they have absolutely set themselves up for success in 2022 and especially 2023 and beyond. Alex, do you have any last words, anything else that you'd like to point out in this 2023 rebuild. I don't think this is going to be the last one that you and I do. I think there might be a couple other teams that we expect.
I like it. I like it, man. This is fun. I think we covered enough here, but I think this just really makes it clear what the vision of DePoto's been. And I think he's just really underrated as a general manager.
Yeah, I agree. Well, hey, we will catch you next time with another rebuild or another bit of prospect draft, anything news. This has been episode 3 of Long and Foul. Alex, thank you so much for your time. And until next time, peace.